Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bon. Let's talk about games. This week, we'll be talking about a giveaway I am doing for a 1-to-1 scale wearable Mass Effect N7 helmet, and you can enter by using a link on my Twitter @BonDiesel. We'll be also talking about the Xbox and Bethesda game showcase, Activision investigating itself, MetaHuman updates, and a whole bunch more. A few things before we get started on the show. Subscribe to the show on your platform of choice, and if you are on Spotify or iTunes, please rate the podcast, leave a review if you must. Make it 5 stars. Come on. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the bell icon in order to be notified of other videos I post. And last, please join the show's Discord by clicking the link in the description of the podcast or video below. Gaming news, let's get into it. Obviously, the big topic, at least for me this week, is going to be the Xbox and Bethesda game showcase. I'm not going to cover every single game. In 90 minutes, they covered a lot. I'm basically going to cover everything that was of interest to me or that I found to be important. So let's jump into it. I'll give my thoughts on the whole show at the end. Redfall. I guess I'll preface this with they did kind of bamboozle a little bit by starting off the show being like, hey, this is going to be the next 12 months of our games. And that was essentially putting their foot down and saying, if you don't see it today, it's not canceled. It's just we want to show what's coming in the next 12 months, which is important because with Redfall and Starfield getting delayed, there's a lot of people saying like, hey, why do I even have Game Pass right now? And I think what this show was supposed to do was to say, this is why you should have Game Pass for the next year. How well that made that argument is up to you, but I think it made it pretty well. The first game that I noticed, and I believe it was the first game they showed, was Redfall. This is a project that I was supposed to come out this summer. That was announced last year. I don't think anyone actually believed that was going to happen because before it even got delayed, we still had no idea what type of game this actually was or what was supposed to be. And so then it got delayed, and it was really interesting. Starfield and Redfall got like bundled together when they got delayed. But I think the anticipation for Starfield is like a unique level. And you may laugh or disagree, but right up there with Elden Ring, in my opinion. Obviously Elden Ring, met its hype. We'll see if Starfield does or not. But like just the Bethesda putting out their first new IP since Elder Scrolls, because Fallout's not even their IP to start. And this is a big deal. Starfield is. And so the Redfall, in my opinion, kind of got lost in the conversation a little bit, even though it was bundled with Starfield, because people were really upset about Starfield being delayed. No one really cared about Redfall because we didn't know what it was, but now we do. And Redfall appears to be, it's really interesting that the first takes on it were that it was like a Rainbow Six Siege, like Left 4 Dead kind of mashup. But now from things that we know about it, after the show and even during the show, is that it seems like it's like a really single player focused thing. Like for instance, if you have people play with you in co-op, only the host of the session progresses their story. Everyone else is basically just there to play. And so that suggests that it's gonna be more intended to be a single player experience. Now, maybe they'll adjust that as time goes on, who knows? But yeah, very interesting. And it looked good. I liked its aesthetic. It's not going for like a realistic aesthetic, which, like, how realistic can you go with like flying vampires, right? Um, but I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I thought that it it looked fun for whatever that means, right? It still wasn't like pure gameplay. Like, it was like an engine. Like, I'm sure someone was at the sticks, right? But it was, as much of a trailer as it was gameplay. Um, my take on it at the end of the day is that before I saw the Redfall teaser or trailer or whatever, I didn't care that it got delayed. I am now interested in when it comes out, and I think that's progress, right? So yeah, Redfall seems interesting. I'm interested in it now, and I wasn't before. I would say that's a victory for Xbox. The next game of note for me was Hollow Knight Silksong. Never played Hollow Knight. Those games, I actually love those games, but I'm bad at them. I'm so bad. Like Celeste. I know Celeste is a great game. I know you can even basically turn on like a god mode, but I hate playing that game, even though I know it's a really good game. And games like Hollow Knight and a bunch of others kind of fall into that too. Dead Cells, that's kind of more in the roguelike thing, but still, like, I'm just not good at them. But I recognize how big of a deal Xbox getting to announce the Hollow Knight Silksong game is, and I think that was really cool. And there, I saw a lot of people were very excited about it, and it seems like that's going to be a really good thing, because I believe it's going to be on Game Pass and all of that stuff. So that's a big deal. The next one of note for me was the Riot Games deal. I couldn't care less about Valorant, League of Legends, all of that. The only thing I actually care about with Riot is the XKD or whatever band, like the virtual girl band, that just their music videos are bonkers. The songs are so good. There's a really good one called Pop Star. That's just the catchiest song ever. It's wild. That, and then of course I'm not going to be able to think about it off the top of my head here. The Netflix animated series is really good. It's so good. And I don't know the first thing about League of Legends, but they take those characters and they've been making these stories about them outside of that game world. And like someone like me, I consider myself like a third party League of Legends fan, even though I don't know anything about the game. I've only heard awful things about it, that it's toxic, it's nasty, but it got me. So what this deal was basically that if you have Game Pass, either Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, you'll have to look, I can't remember off the top of my head. It'd be great to have notes, right? Most of their games are free to play, but they're like the individual heroes and stuff aren't in their games. But if you have Game Pass and you connect that to your Riot account, you'll get all of those things for free. I think one of the games, I think it was League of Legends, it's like a $500 value. That's a big deal. There's a lot of people who play those games, and there may be people who simply sign up for Game Pass just to get those things unlocked. And then, which is, I assume this is Microsoft's plan all along with a thing like this, is get people in for that really good deal that they want for that one thing. And then maybe they'll try this game, and maybe they'll try that one. And then maybe, and then they stick with it and they keep, the Game Pass and all that. So the Riot Games thing is another one that I'm not really personally interested in, but that I think is a huge deal for Xbox and was a really big thing for them to get to announce here. And I believe that's happening this winter. The next game of note for me was A Plague Tale Requiem. Admittedly, I haven't played A Plague Tale Innocence. I think I have it downloaded. I just need to get in. But I've heard rave reviews about it. It's a big deal. I believe it's on Game Pass right now, and I think they even did a 4K upgrade, so I really need to play that. But them getting this as I believe it's a day one Game Pass game, it looks really good. The aesthetic of the game is so cool, and it's starting to delve into that, like, Xbox it seems like they're kind of being like, hey, we probably aren't going to make a whole bunch of like over the shoulder third person action adventure games. These are games I call PlayStation exclusive games. Like it seems like all of their amazing exclusives are all that like pretty similar style of game, and Xbox doesn't have many of those. And I think this is their kind of their way of doing that. Even though Requiem will come out on the PlayStation as well, it's not exclusive. It's, you know, them putting these kind of games on Game Pass is like, it's not exclusivity, but it is them saying like, hey, you know, this might be the best place to play it because you can just, you know, you can pay a subscription and play this game and hundreds of others, but over there you can have to pay $70 for it, you know. So it looked really, really good. I'm very excited to play it, and I really do need to play in a sense before this comes out for sure. The next one for me was Forza. So I'm going to talk about Motorsport. There was a Forza Horizon DLC shown. It's a Hot Wheels DLC. So not only is it Hot Wheels cars, but it's also Hot Wheels like tracks through the world. Looks bonkers, so cool. But Motorsport really stole the show for me. I think from a look at what our next gen can do point of view, which is something that neither console has really done that great so far. For this show, I think Forza Motorsport was the star. They showed off all this really cool tech. They showed off all this wild detail, this deformation of the vehicles, the way that like they're even adding in, and this is more for the race sim type of thing, like the humidity and the temperature of the track due to the temperature of the air and whether the sun is hitting it or not, and like different parts of the track will behave differently if they're in the sun or not. It's just, I actually really like Forza because I think it kind of kept pushing things forward the way I was a big Gran Turismo kid back in the day, like Gran Turismo 1, Gran Turismo 2. And then I started playing the Forza games, and where I feel like Gran Turismo kind of just rested on its laurels a little bit. I feel like Forza really kept trying to push it forward with like customizing cars and careers and all this stuff. Like, I'm really excited for Motorsport. I think that it just looks like it's going to be really fun. I like Horizon, but I just prefer a little bit more grounded feeling, like the way that with Horizon, you can basically just point your car in the direction of your waypoint and just drive through everything, no matter what kind of car you have. That's fun, but I do like the idea of more like competitive racing with damage that matters and this and that and the other. Motorsport, from both a visual and from a gameplay feature point of view, sounds really, really cool. And they've even detailed a little bit since the show, talking about how the career is they've bumped that up a bunch, so we're gonna see you know, a more in-depth career mode, and that's awesome. That's something I am here for. The next game was Minecraft Legends. I'm not a big Minecraft guy. I could care less about Minecraft. But what was exciting to me was I love real-time strategy games. And this game, before the show, there were rumors about a Minecraft RTS. And when this showed, I was like, oh, this is the Minecraft RTS. And I don't think it really is, or I think it's like kind of an RTS, but it looks like it's more like hands-on than just being like an over the, you know, an up high like God mode type of thing, where you're actually playing as like the main character, and maybe you're doing some of that stuff as well. So at the very least, I'm somewhat interested in, and it did tout itself as like an action strategy game and stuff like that. So I'm into that for sure. I've always meant to try out Minecraft Dungeons because I've heard nothing but good things. I know it was like a little bit content sparse when it first came out, but it sounds like it's very popular and doing very well to kind of fill that like Diablo kind of niche for kids essentially. So yeah. The next game was Lightyear Frontier. This is a game that you may, even if you watch the show, you may be like, what's that game? That's the one that looked like it was like No Man's Sky and Farmville smashed together, where you drive around in these mechs and you farm on like alien planets, I think. The game was so gorgeous and it just looked so fun. It was like quaint. You know, like you probably don't have to like fight off waves of you know, aliens and lots of other awful things. It seems like you're probably able to just to just enjoy, some nice simple gameplay, and I think that would be a nice change from the typical rigmarole. The next game that popped out to me was The Last Case of Benedict Fox. I thought this just looked so beautiful, and I just thought it looked so cool. And indie games are so wild right now, and like obviously like Xbox is going to be depending a lot on like big time indie games and like third party AAA games. With games like Starfield and Redfall and stuff delayed, they're obviously going to be resting on Game Pass having these third party games. And a game like this, with The Last Case of Benedict Fox, it's like this like side scrolling like action game. It's hard to describe. You really need to go check it out. It's not the type of game that someone would go out and buy like an Xbox for, right? But it is the type of game, in my opinion, where someone would have like Game Pass because they want to play Halo Infinite or another game that like maybe does sell consoles, but then they would keep Game Pass because of games like The Last Case of Benedict Fox or Lightyear Frontier or Plague Tale Requiem. And that's why I think it was really important for them to show that, and it looked really cool to me. As Dusk Falls was shown. This was shown last year as well. It kind of reminds me of like a more comic booky or less like directly involved like Telltale game. It has a kind of a cartoon, not really a cartoon art style because they're realistic looking characters. It's really interesting, and it seems like it's going to deal with a bunch of big time jumps. It seems like it's going to have something to do with an event that happens at like a gas station or something where there's like a robbery, and probably depending on the choices you make, there's people who die or don't die or who are traumatized or who aren't. And then it looks like there's going to be at least one big time jump where you are dealing with the consequences of those decisions that were made earlier. And so I don't know if it's going to be like a timeline that goes like back and forth, or if it's going to be in order or what, but it just has some like really cool vibes, and I think that's really cool. The next game I want to talk about is Pentiment. So this is actually one that's coming directly it's a first party game, but it's like a AA game. It's not a big AAA title. I believe this is by Obsidian, I think is who's making this one, which is a big deal because they're working on like 4 big projects right now. This seems like it was significantly smaller, but it seems like it's kind of like I believe it's like a Renaissance era murder mystery where it's like a 2D cartoony style, really unique looking game, and it just looked really interesting, I guess is the best way to put it. So Pentiment was definitely one I'm interested in. Again, it may not be a game that sells the console, but it's a game that keeps people around in the that keeps people around Game Pass, especially. There is the next game was Grounded. So that's another Obsidian game, I believe, and it was basically them announcing like the 1.0. So this game's been in like a beta phase for I think 2 years, or like an early access phase. I've played it a little bit. I found it too hard, which I think it's supposed to be like kind of a kid's game. Like it's obviously like you play as children who have been shrunk and are trying to escape their yard and be big again. I think it is more adult themed than I initially assumed, but it's like a pure survival game, and I'm not very good at those, and it's hard for me to like really dive into them. But I have been kind of waiting. I played it. I was like, okay, this is cool. Now I want to wait until it's like out. And it seems like that's happening. I believe it's this fall, where they're going to release the 1.0, where you're going to be able to do the whole story. I think up till this point, only half of the story has been available. So now you'll be able to finish it. And I assume embiggen, do the thing that you're supposed to do. But this is just such a fun little side project. I am, from them, the most excited about the Outer Worlds 2. I love the Outer Worlds 1. It was like a shaved down like Fallout experience. It wasn't the longest game in the world, but like the characters were so cool. Like Parvati, is like on my list of like one of my favorite companions in a game ever. She was just so cool, and I really enjoyed. She did a thing that I've always really enjoyed. I enjoyed like in Andromeda when I was playing as the male rider. When you try to flirt with Suvi, who's one of the pilots, and she doesn't bark up your tree. That like in the role-playing games, it's so common for I'll use a Mark Dara word for the characters in the games, the NPCs, to be player sexual, where they're attracted to your character no matter what. It doesn't matter if their actual character is, canon wise, if they're bi or lesbian or straight or whatever. And what I liked about like trying to romance Suvi as the male rider, or trying to romance like Trainer in Mass Effect 3 as Imshep, they aren't into you. That's not your thing. And there's something about being rejected in those games that's cool, because it gives you at least a little bit of a hint of like realism that no, not every single person in the universe wants to bone your character. And so like part of why I like Parvati is that you find out, pretty far into the game that she's not barking up your tree. And that's really cool. I thought that was an interesting, like, oh, this world doesn't revolve around me. These people all have their own prerogatives. And so while that's, The Outer Worlds 2 is the game I'm really looking forward to. I hope they really expand that, make it like a big AAA feature. This Grounded game, I at one point thought it was really stupid that they were even making it. And it seems like they found an audience, and it's a very like Sea of Thieves type of thing, where like initially you're kind of like, why does this exist? And then as time goes, you're like, oh, that's why. And that's really cool. The next game was Diablo 4. Like, obviously what was really interesting about this announcement was that like Xbox is buying Activision Blizzard, or they're attempting to, right? But that hasn't gone through yet, and it probably won't for a while. And so I was really surprised to see anything Activision Blizzard. But we had Diablo 4. They announced the Necromancer class, which I guess was in 3, but it wasn't announced yet for 4. But they tried to make it, I don't know. It was an interesting reveal. But even before that deal closes, which when that deal closes, you would assume it's going to be Game Pass. It's going to be, all those things. It's going to be that anyways. And that's a pretty big deal. Diablo 4, I know 3 had some failings, I believe, got fixed up for the most part, but they did leave the door open to games like Path of Exile and stuff like that. It's still Diablo. Diablo is Diablo. And I still think it will end up being a pretty popular thing. And I think it's a pretty big get for Xbox to get to show it during their show and to have that Game Pass appeal. Speaking of Sea of Thieves, before they talked about season 7 of that. Not a game I'm interested in, but it is a big success story for Xbox and Microsoft. A game that came out that was a little rough. People didn't really know why it existed, and now like if you meet someone who likes Sea of Thieves, you will know. They will let you know. The people who enjoy that game are passionate about it, and it seems like it's earned it. So it's another game on the list where I'm like, I need to check that out. I think I'll have fun with that, but I'm not there yet. Now, probably the king of games I don't give a crap about but are a big friggin' deal is Persona 3, 4, and 5 coming to Xbox. I listen to the Kind of Funny podcast a lot, to their family of podcasts, and one of the producers there, Barrett, has always been really big about being like, oh yeah, these games are never coming to Xbox. Now, I don't know exactly what games he was talking about. I guess there are some that have come, the Persona games, but some that like were never going to. I think these are some of those where people really didn't think that was going to happen. But it's happening, and it's going to be on Game Pass, and that's a big deal. I don't really know if it means any big changes for the future. I think that until Xbox really establishes itself as like a more competitive Asian, especially Japanese brand, it's just not going to be, they're never going to get a big nod from the games that are the most popular there. And that's just the way it is. Xbox is going to have to do the work to earn those games, basically. The second to last one I was going to talk about here is the Kojima game. So this is the one game I think that was announced that isn't really expected to be like out in the next year. All indications are this game, the negotiations between Xbox and Kojima probably didn't end that long ago, and so there's a pretty good chance this is, you know, very deep in pre-production still and won't be out for years. But Xbox getting an exclusive Kojima game matters. That's a big deal. It's been rumored for a while. The reaction to this was really stupid. It was interesting because like there were people who basically feel like Kojima is essentially like a first party PlayStation guy. So him doing this is this big betrayal. My whole pushback was like, that is the exact kind of attitude he was trying to get away from, by leaving Konami. And so like, it's like a weird take, and I saw people being like, well, people got just as upset when there were timed exclusives for PlayStation. Like, Xbox people got mad. Like, this is like a different thing. Like the paid exclusives or the timed exclusives and stuff like that, that's a much different conversation than this guy just working with a new platform with his studio. You know, they dropped a bunch of cash on his table, and he said okay. And now he's doing the thing. And then finally, Starfield. So this finally showed again, a few weeks ago, they announced it's being delayed to sometime in 2023. We don't really have a date yet. Most of the rumors are thinking the first quarter, but it could be later. And what we saw was a Bethesda game in space. And as someone who loves Bethesda games, that's the highest compliment I can give, right? Like, I thought it was really cool. Genuinely, I think the fidelity of the imagery looks really good. I think that they've taken leaps, maybe not the biggest leaps, but big leaps forward, and their character models, and even like people are ragging on, they're still doing the zoomed in, like face-to-face conversations. That's just their style, and I think that's okay. And what I don't think people paid enough attention to in that specific thing is that, like, in the old Fallout 4, they'll just like sit there and they just like stare at your camera. If you look at the footage from the Starfield reveal, like, they're kind of like, they're moving their shoulders, like they are moving their bodies, and their faces are very expressive. They look much more human than they have in previous games. I thought that part looked great. They showed off base building, they showed off big cities, they showed off ship building, they showed off some combat, which didn't look great. Just kind of like the other stuff, though, is that's Bethesda doesn't make great combat. Like, they make combat that's good enough to tolerate because the rest of the game is so good. And then they kind of wrapped up with what's become one of the more controversial things of Todd Howard doing his big, like, flop his donger on the table moment where he says, like, and there's 1,000+ planets you can explore. And now the conversation for the next 6 months is people are going to be like, oh, but are they all just going to be empty? Which, yeah, they probably will be. Most of them. And they did do a follow-up interview where they clarified that, yeah, I think there was like 4 or 5 big cities. And then there's probably going to be like a few dozen planets that have like little settlements and side missions and stuff like that. And then there's just going to be a bunch of barren planets with nothing, probably for resource gathering. And that's because that's, if we ever settle space in a large way, we're not going to settle every planet. Not every planet can sustain life. Not every planet is useful to settle. And so, anyone who instantly had this idea of like, oh my gosh, there's gonna be 1,000 fully handcrafted planets with full civilizations and stuff, like, one, you just haven't paid attention to Bethesda games before. Even when they just have one large map, the whole map isn't just littered with everything. It has, open space. And I think a lot of these 1,000 planets are going to be the open space of Starfield. And I think that's okay. But we'll have to wait and see. Overall, I thought the Starfield announcement was really good. My biggest complaint was that it's a bummer that they it must have had to have showed off some pretty choppy footage. The frame rate looked like it was struggling to keep 30 if it was, and I don't think it was in some of the scenes. And the combat looks like pretty lackluster. Now, Digital Foundry did do a video this week talking about the show, and they pointed out that there's a bunch of stuff that looks like they just don't like have some stuff on yet, like when it comes to some lighting stuff and like anti-aliasing and stuff like that just wasn't activated in this footage. That should be when the game comes out, because that's so standard nowadays. But yeah, I'm not worried about Starfield. I think Starfield's going to be a very fun game. Maybe it's not going to be a 10 out of 10. That's fine. It doesn't have to be. A solid 8 out of 10 Starfield is probably going to be one of my favorite games ever. And that concluded, for me, the main game showcase on Sunday. I thought it was a really good show. It was really weird. I mean, obviously, a lot of people's takes are very dependent on their like platform preference and all that crap. I thought this was a great show, especially when they knocked it down to like, this is what to expect in the next 12 months. And if they do that again next year and the year after that and the year after that, it's only going to get stronger. I didn't think this was a weak lineup. I thought it was a really great lineup of games that was very light on first party, but was very heavy on third party, and most of them being on Game Pass. Like, a big thing I noted too is I think that they showed 33 games, and like 30 or 31 of them were gameplay. I think there was 1 or 2 just straight up CG trailers. That's a big deal. That's a big deal, because in previous years, Xbox has caught a lot of crap for being like an entire show of trailers. And I think that's why they limited this. I think there's 2 reasons they did 12 months with this one. 1, so they could show games that had gameplay. And 2, so they could retain that Game Pass player base to say like, hey, this is what's coming. Please stick with us. I have seen talks of people being like, okay, well, maybe like they should do this E3-ish show where they talk about the next 12 months. And then maybe like in the fall or winter, they should do like a further out show where they talk about what's coming in the next 2 or 3 years. What games are getting in pre-production, which games are starting actual production, show us concepts, show us CG trailers. Maybe that's the conference where we can say, hey, there probably won't be gameplay here because these games are years away, but here's at least a hint of what's coming. And I think that would be cool. There's also a chance that by next summer, when they do a similar show like this one, they may have more to show us from further down. My guess is that them limiting this to 12 months was that they felt really good about the next 12 months of what they could show us. Maybe not so much about the next 18 months or 24 months, but we'll have to see. A bit of an add-on to that show was on Tuesday, they did an extended showcase, which for all things considered was pretty feature rich. It had multiple new things that weren't in the showcase on Sunday. For me personally, there was one, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a game that was shown. It's one of those, I think it's called, is an isometric game, but it's where, one player plays as the bad guy and then like 4 people play against them. And it's like the Friday the 13th games and stuff like that. And so I saw a lot of excitement about that. We saw Valheim is coming to Game Pass on PC this fall, and then on Xbox next year, which is really cool. That game is very interesting to me, and I'm probably gonna end up playing it on PC, though I may just kind of hunker down and wait for Xbox, but we'll have to see. They showed Fall Guys, which we know that's going free to play and multi-platform on the 21st, I believe, so here just in a few days, which is really exciting. And I believe they showed off a Master Chief outfit for the little beans or whatever they're called. So, and the last feature I thought was super, super cool. And if you have any interest in the war in Ukraine and kind of what is going on there, I highly suggest at least checking out the end of the Tuesday extended showcase for Xbox, because it showed a little basically mini documentary of Stalker 2, which is made by a studio that I believe was based in Kiev. And it was really interesting because it showed how they were like taking down their office and moving, and I believe a bunch of their devs moved to Poland, but at the time of that, and maybe now, I'm not sure, like martial law is in order there in Ukraine, because they're in a full-scale war with another large country that borders them. And while a lot of the employees were able to leave, especially the female ones, many of the men couldn't leave because they're keeping them there in case they need to be called up to fight. And they even showed towards the end of the show multiple people who work there who are in the armed forces and are doing the thing. It's pretty wild. It was a really interesting kind of look into, you know, some of the direct impacts of this war on things that we love. And I understand there's some people who feel like, you know, games are like their escape from that kind of thing and all that, and I can respect that. But like, at some point we have to realize that like games are political. Games are made by real people who feel things and are going through things. And in a situation like this, or in other situations, as games become a much more legitimized form of art, we're just gonna have to, you know, people are either just gonna have to suck it up if they don't like it, or enjoy the fact that games are going to start reflecting like real life and things that are really going on. And I think that's great, especially in this case. So that was the 2 Bethesda shows. I thought they were really, really good. I was very excited by a whole bunch of it. And it's been another one of those situations where I've tried to be pretty careful to not be too concerned about what people think or say about it from the outside, because especially larger creators and podcasts and stuff like that, you know, they're more worried about the clicks than they are about giving like there was so much of an attitude of being like, well, it didn't have this and it didn't have that and blah blah blah, and that's fine, but like, at some point, can we just freaking be happy about something for once? Like, can we just be like, that was pretty dope, that was really good. Could it have been better? Obviously, for sure, but was it still pretty damn cool? Yes. So no, that's just my take on it. I thought it was a great show. I thought the extended showcase was actually really good as well. And yeah, I'm happy to see it, and I'm excited for when a bunch of these games come out and I can play them. In the Stalker 2, they say is coming out next year. I figured it would be delayed for years, but supposedly they're still targeting 2023. So I will buy that game, even though it's on Game Pass. I'm gonna buy it, and I will definitely play it and maybe do some fundraising and stuff around that time. So okay, so some other stories this week. Final Fantasy, they had a big anniversary stream, and it was so funny because I remember seeing some of the chatter about Final Fantasy. Full disclosure, I could not care less about Final Fantasy. Not my thing. I think I played a couple of them on, like, gosh, could it have been like a Nintendo or PlayStation 1? And the problem is with that era, for me, I was a little kid, and there's a pretty solid chance that either one, it was like a demo disc where it was like one of the Final Fantasies, and I played like a 10-minute demo 100 times, and in my brain that was the whole game, or it was just another RPG game or a game like that, the turn-based game. Who knows? I honestly don't know. But that said, this 10-minute stream that a lot of people expected to be nothing turned into, they announced the name of the next, the part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII remake, which has been a really big deal. Part 1 was called Integrate. Part 2 is going to be called Rebirth, and that it's coming, I think, next year. They announced that Crisis, and it's going to be PlayStation exclusive. We'll see for how long. Crisis Core 7, which is another kind of like an offshoot of Final Fantasy 7, is coming, I believe, later this year, and is going to be multi-platform, interestingly enough. And then the part 1 of the Final Fantasy 7 remake will be on Steam later this year, I believe. So it's not going to be on the Xbox yet, which a lot of people thought it would be, but this little 10-minute thing ended up being a much larger thing, and that's really cool. For the people who were into that, that's really exciting. So good for them. Hitting a couple shorter stories here. Activision Blizzard announced that they, after an investigation into whether or not they ignored legitimate concerns about sexual abuse and you know, and harassment and stuff like that, it was found that they did not do anything wrong. The caveat here is that they investigated themselves and hold your breath. They didn't do anything wrong. They're catching a lot of shit for this right now, which they should. I believe, I remember when this investigation started, I believe they hired like an outside firm to do this. I want to say it's someone who was involved in some pretty high profile investigations in some recent years. But you know, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Nothing's going to come of it. That's just the way these things go. And I think the biggest hope for Activision Blizzard is that the acquisition goes through and that they that Xbox can clean things up there and Kotick gets booted and they can kind of start changing the culture there. It's not going to happen overnight. And yeah, I don't know. It's just a bummer of a situation with them. So anyways, the next story I thought was kind of funny. I noticed it pretty big this week. Star Citizen is definitely doing a big marketing push right now. Suddenly after the Starfield announcement and trailer came out, obviously there was probably a lot of interest in space games. And seems like Star Citizen really jumped on that bandwagon by definitely not paying a bunch of streamers to suddenly start making content and streaming the game. It's really weird because it's so obvious when it happens. It always cracks me up when a new Ubisoft game comes out because they pretty much, I'll never forget. So the Division 2 came out, and I think Breakpoint came out afterwards, the Ghost Recon game. And I'll never forget seeing tweets by someone and probably a few people the Division 2 came out and there were a lot of people playing it and its Twitch numbers were good. And then they dropped down because that's how looters are, right? And I'll never forget that when Breakpoint came out, like the day it came out, someone made a tweet like, huh, Breakpoint's kicking the Division's butt, because Breakpoint had like 80,000 people watching it, and the Division 2 had like 20,000 or 25,000 or something. It was still fairly popular, right? And I'll never forget that if you looked at the Breakpoint viewer, like the list of streamers streaming it, it was like Shroud and like Dr. Lupo, or it was like 3 people who were like 75,000 of the views. And were clearly being paid to play the game by Ubisoft. Like they were doing an ad, right? Or a bounty or whatever. And like they weren't playing that game because they enjoyed it. They didn't give a crap about it, because as soon as that ad ended, they never touched it again. Probably didn't even think about it again. And so this is definitely, Star Citizen. It's such an interesting game because I don't want to say it's like a cult, but it kind of seems like it is, maybe a little bit. But it's like the people who are invested in it like really believe in it. And I think it is like a thing of like, when you have skin in the game, you're just going to be biased, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're at least like honest about it, right? Like as long as you like acknowledge that, like, if I didn't have money in this, my opinion may be different, but then the people who hate Star Citizen like really hate it. To me, it's just weird. Like someone on my Twitter today said it's the best game they've ever played, which is cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's really exciting for that person. But then I'm sitting back like, the game's not even done. From the last things I've seen, it's like not even close to being done. And it's been in development for like 10 plus years now. I think they crossed the $500 million revenue mark. I don't know if that's, I'm sure obviously it's revenue from, profit from the game. I don't know if that's also from the huge crowdfunding thing that they've done and have continued to do. So it's like, if you're into that game, like that's cool, but like you have to at least be able to acknowledge why people on the outside are like, like this game does not seem like it's on the up and up. It basically seems like one of these things where like the more and more money they got, they just kept layering on more and more stuff. And it's just like they've just promised so much more than they could ever deliver. And either they just aren't going to deliver, or they're going to work on it and keep raising money for 30 years, which, I'm sure there's people who will be there for it. But I just had to kind of point out that I did think it was kind of funny how really blatant they were this week when it came to, that they're doing some paid ads, but, good for them, whatever. The second to last story here is there was just a really cool thing I saw this week for any of my Mass Effect fans, or anyone who is excited about a game that's going to be on Unreal Engine. I saw a update that was actually shared by the Unreal team about someone who took so they have this metahuman thing, right, where it can make like randomly generated humans who look like really legitimate. Like it's weird. It's super weird. They look so real. But what's maybe even more impressive about this tech is how integrated it is with animation stuff. So like, not only does it randomly generate these humans, but they're automatically like perfectly rigged up to do talking and emotions and their eyes moving naturally and all this stuff. Well, what this retweet was, or the share was that someone had adapted that system to work with non-human faces. So they showed an example of like a very alien looking alien that they had figured out how to make this system work with them. And for someone like me who's really excited about the upcoming Mass Effect and stuff like that, like obviously for the next Mass Effect, they're going to have such an easier time, randomly generating or making all of these unique looking humans and Asari and maybe even Quarians if they show their face. But what are they going to do about like Turians and Solarians and Krogan and stuff like that? In two ways. One, making a bunch of unique looking models so we don't have an Andromeda situation where they're all the exact same one and it's awful. And two, being able to quickly have them ready to do animations and stuff. And so if they're able to do, even if they can't do the random generation, if BioWare is able to utilize this animation rigging thing, it's such a big deal, because a part of this metahuman system is that, say, like I could record this podcast and I could take a metahuman and I could submit this MP3, this audio, into that system, and it would automatically move their lips appropriately for my audio file. I'm sure that there has to be fine tuning done and stuff like that for really cinematic moments and stuff like that. But the fact that they have a system that can pretty much easily just take voiceover and you throw it right in there into Unreal, and the characters will do. Now I'm sure you need to do things like at least pick like animations for their emotions and where they look, and obviously, but I have to imagine that lip sync with audio with voiceover has to be one of the biggest parts of an animator's job, and has to be so time intensive. And for whether it's the next Mass Effect or any of the other games using Unreal 5 in this metahuman system and all that, I'm really curious to see what we hear from devs in the future of them talking about how much productivity they were able to have, and how much things were sped up in their game development process because of that. So the last bit here will be a first take on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I played it on Game Pass. If you remember from like the 90s, the arcade Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games where it was just button mashers and you could play with a bunch of your friends, that's what this is. It's so good. If you have access to this game, especially through Game Pass, play it. I've played through 3 levels. I may never touch it again, but I really enjoy it. It's so fun. It's so satisfying. I'm playing on easy level. If you want to see some gameplay, I do have it on my YouTube channel. It's just Bon Diesel. I have some 1440p footage. I think it's about 12 or 13 minutes of gameplay, and it's just a blast. It's so fun. It looks so good. It moves. It controls really well. Yeah, definitely check out that game if you can. It is fan-freaking-tastic. I am going to move into the listener questions part here. So these are questions that people have asked me on Discord or Twitter or YouTube or wherever. If you are in chat and you happen to be listening to this live, which I'm doing on Twitch, you can ask questions in chat and I will catch them before the show is over. But we do have 2 questions here from Discord. The first one being Pizza Morg saying, have you played The Quarry? If no, have you played any of those sorts of games? I think I remember you mentioning you picked up Life is Strange a while back, but I don't remember you ever saying anything about it. So I haven't played Life is Strange yet. I know they did that like remaster, and I intend at some point on playing that. The only games like this I've ever played were the Telltale Walking Dead games, which I freaking fell in love with. I think it was last summer. I played all of them through the summer and was just like, I have a young baby, at the time, a young daughter. We were in this crazy pandemic situation. It's just, I really got into it, and I've tried to play a couple more since, and I think that maybe that game was just a very unique situation for me because I haven't really gotten into the other ones. The Quarry, I've been seeing stuff about how incredible it looks, and I'm definitely curious because it seems like there is like an insane number of possibilities that you can go through, and that it is like kind of, it's not as gameplay intensive. It's kind of just like, and there's even modes where you can just play as like a director. So I am interested, but no, I haven't played it, and I haven't done Life is Strange yet, but I am curious to at some point. The second set of questions here comes from Master Prime on Discord. It says, is it okay to play Overwatch knowing the Blizzard Activision controversies? Yeah, so that's a really common topic right now because it seems like you can't really hit any, especially AAA dev, but even a lot of indie devs, without finding that they have like a producer who did this or that, or that they treat their employees like crap, or this or that or the other. And I believe it was a take, and I think it was by someone, either Jeff Grubb or Mike, who he does the Game Mess with. I believe it was one of them saying like, hey, these games are being made by the people who you aren't mad at. And if when you play those games, you're justifying their work, and you're giving attention to the things that they worked really, really hard on. And yeah, some nasty people are going to benefit and profit from it, but you are helping those people who don't deserve, to be punished and things like that. And so maybe it's just copium or something. I'm not sure. But I think it's okay to play a game like Overwatch, even though they're having so many issues over there. I think there's a lot of people who aren't the bad guys who benefit from you still giving attention to that product. I think at the very least, people should just try to be informed, stay up with these investigations, stay up with these acquisitions, stay up with like what happens to Bobby Kotick and things like that. And those devs who do get called out, those producers and directors and stuff who do get called out for harassment or being abusive or forcing people to, crunch more so than is necessary, things like that. That's how you can kind of make up for it, I think. And then the second question from Master Prime, do you play pixel art games? I've dabbled. I like it. I think it looks really cool. I want to say Dead Cells should count as one of those. I love that game, even though, like I said before, I'm not very good at it, but I really do enjoy it. I love the look of pixel art games. There's definitely been a few that I've tried that I didn't jive with the gameplay, but I pretty much always really enjoy the look. So yeah, for sure. Thank you for those questions. Again, make sure if you have any of your own, hit up my Discord, hit up my YouTube comments, hit up my Twitter, or the podcast Twitter at the EchoCast. Or if I'm live streaming like I am right now, the recording of the podcast, you can always ask in chat. And finally here, we're going to do some content updates. The only thing I really have right now is that there is a huge sale going on at BioWare. They had this helmet I'm giving away. It's a $150 helmet. I got it cheaper than that. I got it for like $70. It was selling for $15 today. And it's very cool. It is sold out, but there's a bunch of stuff they're selling right now, and it's all Mass Effect stuff. I think there is something worth discussing there, but maybe not this week. My guess is they're trying to clear out inventory because they might have some runs of some maybe cool stuff coming sooner than later, but we'll have to wait and see. If you want anything from the BioWare store, whether it's Mass Effect or Dragon Age or Anthem, because they still have merch for Anthem on, you can use my BioWare ambassador code for 20% off. That code right now is BW Sales, SALES. That'll give you 20% off. If you try to use that code, just DM me. and I can always make a new code for you. I can make as many codes as I want. So if one expires or gets used too much, just let me know and I can get you a different code. And that works for almost everything on their website. It's very cool. And that's where we're at. I'm going to wrap this thing up. If you would, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast provider. And don't forget to rate the podcast, especially on Spotify and iTunes. If you're on the YouTube, please thumbs up this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to help with the algorithm. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and on Twitch. Please check out the EchoCast and Bond Diesel merch at my Streamlabs merch store, and the link in the description down below. That is all I have. So until next time.